all Canadian families, we are on the Titanic. The iceberg hasn't hit yet, so we're not sinking. If we don't shift course, that iceberg is coming for us.
I'm not planning on leaving. I'm fighting. We want to make this country incredibly great.
We begin to see that it really isn't about diversity. It is about punishing the people who perform beyond the mean.
For people who don't care, where do you see Canada going?
Oh, it's catastrophic. It is that bad.
What is the carbon tax doing to lower carbon emissions?
Exactly.
I love this country. I was born in this country. I believe in what this country stands for. I believe in its people. I believe as a place opportunity for all to come and live, but the path that we're on is not working. And we are not going to be what we're supposed to be if we continue along this path.
Yeah.
Citizens, welcome to today's episode. This is a special episode where we're discussing a number of things. There feels like there's just constant flow of news that just keeps happening at like a rate we've never seen. Obviously, Canada, USA, Mexico, there's lots going on, so lots to talk about. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm here in Winnipeg right now in kind of our secondary studio, and David is joining me actually from the country that seems to be the hottest topic around, from the United States of America. David.
I haven't left Canada, just so you know. I'm not immigrating
He's not
to the
moving.
United States.
Yeah.
We are enjoying some family vacation time here down in Florida in St. Petersburg. So, yeah, it's been wonderful. I got a lovely view. Love being on the water. So, doing well.
Awesome. Well, in light of that, I just quickly looked up what some of the headlines were that's been in between Canada, USA, and it actually says right now that this month, last year, tourism has declined since then, for this month, 23% right here, right now, because of everything that's going down. So tourism has taken a sharp decline. That's quite significant for the United States, for Canadians to stop going down to the US. So it's obviously impacting people, where our dollar is probably the weakest it's been in a long time. And people are uncertain, I guess, about what's happening in the US. So have you noticed anything? Has anyone noticed you're Canadian? Is it obvious to everybody?
Yeah, I'm walking around saying A and talking about how hot it is all the time, so people just pick me out. I'm simply Canadian. No, I love talking to people down here, so I just strike up conversations anywhere. And yesterday, there was this nice couple with their grandchild. We're at St. Pete's Pier, and they're from upper state New York and Massachusetts, and they are talking through. They actually made a funny comment to me saying, "Just so you know, we still love you. You're welcome here as Canadians." And I was like, "Well, thank you. I feel good about that." So there's lots of conversation, but we're kind of in a Canadian stronghold here.
Yeah, for sure. And it's what I find so interesting about this, and we'll get into this right now, is I find people's interpretation about what's happening to be so bizarre, so strange. And I'm curious, for everybody who's watching right now, are you mad at Donald Trump? Are you mad at our government? Are you mad at our government's response? Or the fact that Trump seems to be dropping the hammer on us? But that's the thing I think I almost want to reflect on. As you and I were talking about today's episode, one of the things that we reflected on was actually the prediction you made a number of weeks ago, where you were talking about essentially what you think the playbook's going to be. And I think we're one piece away from that being totally true. And essentially, the first one is that Mark Carney, you predicted, would probably be taking the Liberal leadership. So here we are. Mark Carney is taking Liberal leadership. Something to touch base on that is the very controversial thought that a lot of people are wrestling with, and if you follow our social media accounts, and I hope you do, for even if you agree or disagree with us, is David was unpacking the idea of the fact that he's an unelected prime minister that will be taking office. And for some of you, that might trigger you, but nobody elected him. And I understand how the processes work. We can talk about that. But the second thing was portraying Donald Trump and Pierre in the negative same light. That seems to be happening right now. And the third thing was Jagmeet Singh propping up the Liberals. And so those were your predictions. And it's interesting how much of that has actually come true.
Well, I will say first, I don't think it was a really wild prediction to predict Mark Carney. I think all signs were pointing to that. And his,
of course,
his victory was convincing, 85%. of the vote. So there's 130,000 and change. I think it's like 136,000 voters that were registered in the Liberal Party that did. And he took 85% of the vote. Like, that's crushing for the other people, especially Chrystia Freeland, who I think was 8%. So he was definitely the chosen child. So that has definitely come true. We are seeing the media, and again, this is where we have an issue with the media in our country. And I will even say, I've been seeing a lot of chatter from people addressing that there has been an onslaught of liberal bots bogging down social media, literally an increase in the last 3 weeks or 2 weeks, which is really interesting to see that.
And you're talking about like actual comments and all that?
Comments, 100%. I bet you can check some of ours. There's on there too. It's getting harder and harder to tell, right? Before they used to be so simple, the comments, you can say, oh, it's clearly a bot. But now they're starting, with the emergence of AI, they're starting to mimic and starting to be able to use language that sounds like people who are just riffing as they're texting. So that's interesting. But the media issue is you're seeing the media really starting to portray Poilievre as a friend of Trump, a friend of Musk. Musk endorsed Poilievre, right? Look what those guys are doing there. You want Poilievre to do that to our country? So there's a massive media blitz and a political blitz to associate the two.
One of the things I see Pierre doing, though, is it seems like he's clearly disassociating himself with Trump. Like he's, because even his stances seems to have kind of, his tone seems to have changed slightly, where he's kind of, they're all saying the same thing. Justin Trudeau, Carney, Pierre, Jagmeet, they're all saying the same thing constantly right now, which is interesting.
Yeah, it seems lock and step across the country, and their response has been, what Trump is doing is bad. We must unify, and we must fight tariff for tariff. And we've talked a lot about this. I've been pretty vocal how I'm really against that step. You just simply don't go to a fight against an economy that's 14 times bigger than you when we are in a very weak position economically. Like, we don't have strength. I've used this example of, it's like bluffing in a game of poker while your cards are exposed. Totally. And I feel like we just have a lack of wisdom going on right now.
And that's what I find so surprising.
Right step to go about.
That's what I find so surprising. Like, I just watched a video today of Jagmeet saying, Trump started this fight and we're going to finish it. And I was like, do you even know what you're saying? Like, I was like, be more careful with your words, please. Like, you're representing our country. This is my children's country, our country. Like, please be careful. Like, oh my gosh, it felt like such an irresponsible statement to say to somebody. Just like you said, yeah, it's like they can outweigh this. We can't. Like, we can't weather this storm. We have to be as wise as we can. And then to see what Doug Ford did with the electricity, which is very interesting. And for those who don't know, is he put some subsidies. A premier can't put tariffs on anything. That's a federal thing to do. But he put subsidies on the electricity that we sell to the U.S. to make it exponentially more expensive. It only lasted, I think, for like 16 hours or 18 hours because Trump threatened to double the tariffs to 50%. So he quickly backed off. Just like you said, cards exposed. Doug backed off very quickly. But Brian Lilley's take, I was actually watching Brian Lilley on Bridge City News, and Brian Lilley's take was that this was really wise and that he now they've invited him to come down to the White House in 2 days. So he'll be at the White House on Thursday. Doug Ford. What that means, who knows? But Trump seemed to be pretty upset about it, saying, like, how dare you do this to people's livelihood or like electricity?
Well, it shed a light for Trump as well. At least I'm sure he knew this, but publicly he started to state, why do we even need to get our electricity from Canada? Yeah. Obviously, because the infrastructure that Ontario and Quebec has, but that shines a light up. I'll back up a second. We have to understand, what is Trump trying to accomplish here? Yeah. He's not just picking a target and just shooting for the sake of shooting and trying to blow everything up. Trump understands the fact that U.S. is in a pickle as well with their debt. Their debt, which is in the tens of trillions, I think it's over 30 trillion. I haven't been reading a lot the last couple of weeks, so I'll call it vacation brain. Jared, if you can look it up, I think it's somewhere in there. But
how much the U.S. debt's at?
It's an issue.
The United States you're talking about?
It's a massive issue. Yeah, the U.S., their national debt that they've run up over the last, forever, but it's been ramping up crazy. The point is, Donald Trump understands that they have to very drastically shift things around in their country in order to be able to actually continue forward to grow and make a great country, because they're not in a good... What is the debt right now?
36.56 trillion.
And another issue is that the debt, the long-term debt that's being held, is going to be coming up for refinancing here in the next little bit, right? And so there is an interesting thing going on where Trump, and this is the thing I was kind of reading on, I was talking about a little bit about before the show, is that really what Trump is trying to do is trying to lay the framework for an economic union between Canada and Mexico. But not just this. It was actually a similar thing how it was proposed back in the 80s when NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was being written, which was actually only at the time between Canada and the U.S. But Trump knows they have to deal with their debt issues right now. And so he's really trying to reset the country economically, also geopolitically, hence his tariff and his rhetoric with Canada and with Mexico. He wants both of us to come to the table to really, let's make, this is again, just kind of my thoughts, but really make it three countries that can work really well. And maybe a kind of an example would be like the EU, but I'm hesitant to say that because the EU is very dysfunctional, because there's great economies there and there's horrific economies. Like you look through Spain and some others, like it really makes it not work well. But if you can have three countries that has this, and Kevin O'Leary's been talking a lot about this, and I was wondering, why is he the guy going this way? So I started looking into it a bit, is that there's almost, it becomes an issue of where does the sovereignty take place between each nation. But economically, let's make it free. Geopolitically, but the other issue as well, he knows he wants Canada to come to the table militarily, right? This kind of North American shield. So all that to say, you guys, is Trump is really trying to reset the table here, because he knows both our countries aren't doing well. Specifically he's a nationalist, which is fine, building America first. He's trying to reset everything and doesn't like the trade agreements. Money's going out. Every $50, $100, $200 billion is a big deal for them continually. So anyways, just a little history. You have to understand why is Trump doing these things. He's not just holding a machine gun trying to shoot everything he can.
Well, and like even I just typed in here into ChatGPT, just saying over the past 16 years, how much has the debt grown? And in the last 16 years ago, it was 11.91 trillion, and it's now 36.5. So it's grown by $24 trillion in 16 years. Like that's 4 presidencies. That's just, and now of course COVID is a huge proportion of that, and maybe I can get a breakout of that. But that's the reason that Doge is so vital right now. I know it seems to be super political, and people are saying Elon Musk is an unelected official. Of course he is. Most people are unelected. The president is the elected individual here that you're referencing to, but Elon, of course, is not. He's appointed, and so the amount of money he's finding is just insane. Like the USAID is just wild. It's the amount of money he's freeing up there is. I think he was saying that at the current rate, it was spending $1 billion an hour, 24/7, 365, and he was like, "That's what's that? $1 trillion a year?
$1 billion an hour."
Yeah, I just finished watching him talk about that. He was saying it's $1 billion an hour, 24/7, 365. And he was saying, like, that's why we have to find these outrageous things. And he was talking about Social Security and fake individuals and identity fraud, billions upon billions upon billions. And he was saying at this rate, they're going to be able to free up $100 billion in no time flat in the next number of months. Like these numbers, that's why I don't get why this is politicized. He's freeing up taxpayers' dollars and making your economy stronger. We need to find as many of these things as we can. In fact, I'm looking forward to the day that Canada has a Doge of its own, a Department of Government Efficiency. It's not a political issue. We need government efficiency. We've inflated so much that our debt is just getting larger and larger and larger, which is why we're both in the same seat here, where our debt is so far off the deep end. Our borrowing cost of the debt is off the deep end. For a country of what are we at, 40 million now? We can't afford this. There's not enough tax dollars to even pay this down. So we have to find new ways to do this, which is why I think things like the carbon tax do exist. I think they're trying to desperately find more tax dollars. they would never say that, but that's my interpretation on these types of taxes is they're trying to figure out other revenue sources. And so it's getting pretty grim.
So, Jared, who would you appoint to run the Canadian Doge?
Elon Musk. But you know why though?
I was going to say.
What? What were you going to say?
I was going to say that I'm like, yes, be Canadian. I'm like, oh wait, but he is. Apparently has a Canadian.
Yeah, he does apparently have a Canadian citizenship. The reason I like someone that's like him is that he has absolutely nothing to gain here. He has everything to lose, actually. You know what I mean? He's got massive companies on the line. Everything, like even if you go to the Doge website, every action they take, they're tracking every single thing. So like even in the interview I was watching him discussing Doge, he was talking about how like when people criticize, he's like, specifically what part? Tell me. And he goes, we take them to task. We go right to them and go, what part exactly? And then he goes, whenever we take them to task, they always back down. They don't actually have any real evidence or thoughts. He goes, because you can't. There's nothing that isn't transparent. If you go to their actual Doge website, and Paul, maybe put it on the screen, put the Doge website on for people to see it so that they can see the actual breakdown. That's the most transparent government anything I've ever seen ever. And that's what he's saying is like, criticize all day. And so the idea of him I like is the fact that he's got nothing to gain and everything to lose. He needs to stay in good standing. His companies depend on it. He needs to keep the country functioning and growing. His companies depend on it. Like he's like, even I was watching him talking about giving to charity, and the guy goes, why don't you do more giving to charities with your money? And he goes, they can't do as much as I do. The illusion that some of these charities give that they're helping, he goes, I'm trying to actually advance the planet. I'm trying to go to electric. I'm trying to figure out renewable energy. I'm trying to go to another planet so that people can continue the civilization. Because if we don't do it now, who's going to do it? And so he's going, my money's better spent here. Sorry. Like, and it was that's what I mean is like he's got nothing to gain here and just everything to lose.
I had a different guy come to mind first, but it was Kevin O'Leary as a shrewd businessman.
Yeah.
Like you want a guy there that's just, but the thing is, you have to remember, Elon Musk is not calling the shots as to what's cut and what's not cut, right? He's not government. He is simply going through and he is finding and he is recommending, right? Which then the government takes into consideration. But anyways, that's a interesting thought. I think all Canadians, we all need to remember like that we have as a country, like, I'll say it this way. We can use this moment of what Trump is doing to try to puff out our chests and say, look how strong we are, and not learn anything from this and just create an enemy which is going to hurt us even longer. Or we can use this moment to actually take our medicine, analyze what have we been doing to put our country in this position over the last decade, 2 decades, whatever you want to say. We should take our medicine and what can we learn from it and how can we use this moment to be stronger? Where can we tighten up? What thing can we cut? What do we need to do? Like Trump is, as I said, resetting his country economically, also culturally, but also geopolitically. Like that is what he is doing with these extreme measures. And they don't have a lot of time, right? They've got to get this stuff done before midterms. So they are going like 100 miles an hour to get this done. And I think Canada, and this is part of what we talked about earlier, the media is painting Trump as the bad guy, right? And the stuff that he does, and I understand you put personality into it, he can rub a lot of people the wrong way. I said, but if you look at what the media is now trying to say and go through with this, is they are really, really starting to put the target on Trump as if he is the cause of our problems. Yeah. And that's one of the things I am most concerned about, is that we're simply going to point and say, that's our issue. We have to fight that. When actually we need to look internally and say, what have we been doing to put ourselves in this mess? Like if we had a good trade relationship, if there was several things going on and we were in a position where we're financially strong, we could actually start to go head to head a little bit with an economy that's 15 times bigger. But at least you're positioned to find a win-win, right? If it's like the little guy going up against a giant corporation. If you really want to go to war economically, they're going to wait you out. Yep. And eventually you're going to burn. And we already have a ton of capital leaving our country at extraordinary rates. Yeah. and we keep going this direction, guess what's going to happen? You're going to see free markets thriving in the U.S. More capital is going to keep going there, not just be redirected, but leaving our country. So anyways, some that I'm nervous that Canadians are just going to look at Trump as the bad guy, and actually we don't have the courage to look inwardly and say, what are we doing that's putting ourselves in this position?
And that's exactly it. It's like, we have to hold our leadership accountable. We have to talk with the fact that we wasted so much time in the face of this. Like, there's a clip of Jagmeet that I was actually, you know what? I'll play it right now because it's worth responding to. Because again, it just seems like it's just the blame games happening, and there's no responsibility being taken. And again, it's just it seems like it's. We've been saying this a lot, but it seems like it's party first over country. They're all thinking about their parties and their election, and it's really unfortunate. But the thing that I'm challenging, and I'm curious for anyone watching, do you really think this is Donald Trump's fault? Like it just seems silly to me. Like the closest thing I could compare this to is like if your landlord put his rent up. It's just like blaming the landlord. It's like, well, no, he owns the house that you live in. If it's fair market value, deal with it, figure out ways to get yourself in a better position to handle the new price that he's putting in. But we're not going to sit here and scream at the landlord all the time. It's like, this is the position we put ourselves in as a tenant of this property. Like, it's a similar type scenario where it's like, why didn't we deal with this? Why didn't we go to the table? Why didn't we, like even the JCCF lawsuit that went forward to see if they could open up government so that we could actually stop proroguing it and continue it to go, and so we could call an election possibly, that got overturned. Like, even that was just wild to me. I couldn't even believe that when I saw the result of that. I think we all three of us, you, Paul, and I texted, and it was like, it got overturned. I don't even know what happened there.
So frustrating.
So frustrating. Because this is the actual mechanism to get our government to do what it has to do to represent the people. And it just frozen, completely frozen in what you're going to hear Jagmeet say right now, in the most intense economic, economic pressure we've ever seen, ever. And so here, I'll play the clip, and it's worth responding to.
Hello, Mr. Singh. With Mark Carney's victory last night, he's going to be the Prime Minister in a couple of days. Do you think he has the mandate required to be able to govern the country at this point in time, considering the trade war with Donald Trump? Or do you think it would be appropriate to head to an election quickly?
What I've said around a timing of an election is we are up against probably one of the most grave economic threats that we've seen in our lifetime, given the breadth of it, the uncertainty of it, and the potential length of it. This could last the 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency. So
I'm going to pause it right there. So he's acknowledging it's the most grave, most intense that we've probably ever seen. And then he's saying possibly could last 4 years, which to me is a complete abandonment of responsibility. That the fact that you would even say that means like there's a total, complete way out here. And we have yet to actually sit at the table to start talking.
This is potentially worse than what we've ever seen. And given how serious it is, I've said my criteria for moving forward. One thing is we got to put in place supports our workers. We had a couple of announcements, but nothing really at the level necessary to let a worker know if you lose your job because of this trade war, we got your back. That is not actually in place right now. So supports for those workers, one, and two, a plan, an economic plan that creates more jobs in our country, that we build Canadian and buy Canadian. I think those two things need to be put in place first, and we can have an election afterwards. Given the gravity of what we're against, how serious it is, given the potential loss of jobs, given the workers that I've spoken with and the leaders I've spoken with said, we need something in place now before we go to an election. I'm ready to go tomorrow. If that's what Mark Carney decides, we're going to go. We're going to fight. But I think it's the time now to put in place some of these protections before we go to an election.
You know my example I gave about the landlord upping the rent situation there? That's like me going to my wife and saying, hey, the landlord upped our rent. It's going to be much more expensive for us to live. In fact, much, much more difficult. I'm not sure we can afford it. But I applied for a new credit card. And we can use this credit card to pay for everything. We're going to be totally fine. Like that's what this is. That's what he just said. Like, we're going to print money. We're going to send it out. We're going to have a relief plan. Oh.
Except, Jerry, you don't have to pay that credit card off because someone else, your neighbor, actually is going to be forced to pay it off for you. That's the completion.
That's so good. Holy smokes, you're totally right. Wow.
That's who wouldn't take that deal, man? I got a credit card that my neighbor gets to rack, or I get to rack up, and he has to pay it. I'll take that all day long.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? Gosh.
Just as long as I don't have to confront my neighbor or talk to him.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, even at the end of that clip, you can kind of see him backtracking from the things that he had said before, where he said that he wants an election. It seems like he's saying he'll do the election if Carney decides he'll do it, but he seems like he's trying to defer it. And one thing you and I were talking about before is that, well, he got his pension, so now he's good to go for that. So he's secure financially.
He's ready to go. He's ready to go to battle. He wasn't before for 2 years, but he is now. Something else that was interesting, which I agree with, but there's a little insight. Obviously, built for Canadian by Canadian. Like, you have to remember, that's what Trump is doing. Built for American by Americans. It's a nationalist view. I'm surprised that Jagmeet said something like that. That is a nationalist view. Sometimes that can be a dirty word. I think it's a great word. The strongest thing that we can have in our world is strong nations, not this WEF globalist idea of one giant open free world. No, that's horrible. When you have strong nations, you can keep each other in check, and each nation represents its culture. So I am in agreement with that. But if you notice that statement, it takes a lot of time to build the infrastructure in a country, right, to be self-supportive of built for Canadian by Canadian. And he's using that in the context of before an election. Yeah. So you're right. I think he's slowly laying the groundwork for propping up or helping the Liberals maintain what they need to, at least. Like, you and I can be totally wrong. Like, we're hearing from also some of our friends in some parties that they're preparing for a snap election. Like, it could be called in the next couple of weeks, right? So we'll see if that happens. But
I'm very surprised. My prediction for that is that I don't think Carney's going to call an election. I think they're allowed to go. I think we said, what was it before, that they're legally allowed to go into 2026. I can't see Carney becoming the PM because he's not officially PM yet, I don't think. So the transition still has to happen. Nope. Then he'll become PM. I can't see. My thoughts is that they're going to drag that out under the illusion of anti-Trump as long as they possibly can, saying, sorry, we can't go to an election right now. We got to save the country and do this. And so my thoughts is that we're not going to see an election. It's going to go into 2026. And in that entire time, they're going to demonize Trump all they can to try to get as much support for the Liberal Party as possible. Conservatives are still leading by huge strides in the polls. And so
10 points. I saw a CBC poll saying 10 or 12 points still, which is still a very healthy lead.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So that's my prediction, is that I don't think there's an election coming, not until 2026, is that they're going to use this under the economic pressure that we're currently facing, would be my guess.
We know Carney is taking up the direction of fighting Trump, being strong, strength for strength. We will not back down, that type of thing, right? Trump's the enemy. That's part of their political playbook. Jared and I were just chatting before the show. If you look back at the president of Mexico's most recent speech, it was actually quite compelling. It's important to keep Mexico in the conversation because Trump is also talking to Mexico the way that he's talking to Canada. We are a part of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And as I said, Trump wants to reroute that. But the tone that Mexico is giving is a complete 180 from what Canada, our leaders have been doing. And even Pierre Poilievre, who's the leader of the opposition, is coinciding with the rest of the Canadian leadership. I should say most of them, not all of them. Is that her speech was essentially, you know what, we are proud that we are the number one trade ally with the U.S. We are going to continue to strengthen that relationship. We're going to work hand in hand with U.S. to go to war on the cartels. Like, they are literally coming to the table because they understand that if you want a strong Mexico, you want to have great relationship and strong trade and strong ties with the U.S. Why? Because Mexico benefits. Yeah. And Canada, man, it's like, I wish we would have taken the same approach, like that we want to build relationship. We want better trade. We're willing to come to the table and drop tariffs. Like, there's some simple solutions here. Mm-hmm. I think that we could easily do. It just seems like wisdom is not prevailing yet. I pray it does, but we'll see.
That's exactly it, and that's why, like, the thing that I'm surprised isn't being talked about more, and I'm actually really curious if you agree with me on this, and of course it's fine if you don't, but I actually am still not convinced. Actually, a better way to say this is I'm still convinced that Trump still wants Canada. He's still saying it. Every time he rebuttals, like even when he rebutted Doug Ford on his electricity, he still commented about it being the 51st state. He's still saying that. And so I'm not convinced that that's not the road he wants to go down. I think he does. I think he's still thinking security, country, northern border, the lack of use of resources, the disadvantage of the relationship. I think there's all these pieces that he's going, this doesn't make sense. And then actually even what makes me even more curious is after he started rebuttaling about why do we rely on Ontario to supply us power, I bet you that's another thing in his wanting of Canada going, if they have the power that we need to, add it to the pile. Why not? Like, so I'm not convinced that he doesn't want it still. It seems like he does. He's still saying it, but no one's acknowledging it, which is interesting. So I guess I'd ask you, do you think he does? Or
yeah, I wish we got to find a way to interview President Trump.
Yeah, I know.
We can let him tell us himself. I feel like there's two sides of it. I think Trump is a strategist when it comes to negotiation and trade. And I think he sees a weakness. I also think he sees a certain amount of people in Canada that love that idea. So he's using that as a tactic to get us to the table to renegotiate and reframe how North America looks. Not necessarily in terms of unified, completely like become one country, but I think laying the framework of a lot more freedom between the two countries to pass through, not only as people, but as economies, as military, a lot more sharing of the resources. So I think it's that. I think if that fails and parts of Canada wants to annex themselves, I think he's like, great, we'll do that too. We'll expand. So I think both options he's open to. Oh God, that's really interesting. I was watching the other day on the Jason Levine show. He had Bruce Party, who we do respect his thoughts quite a bit. Jeffrey Rath, we texted a bit about him. He's an Alberta lawyer, and it seems like he's had a lot to work to do with independence for Alberta. And he was the one who went down to the White House. I'm not sure if he succeeded or not, but tried to go down to the White House to talk about Alberta potentially going down there. They had an interesting conversation about the Commonwealth of Canada and about Alberta specifically leaving the Confederation here, the Commonwealth here. And it's actually worth listening to because Bruce Party actually wrote like a miniature constitution for Alberta if Alberta decided to leave.
Really?
And he even says, I get why and he goes, this is what it would sound like or should sound like if you guys want to. And he goes, I get why you do. I don't think you should because but he actually made a statement saying that I think actually the best thing for Canada might be Alberta leaving because it'll make the rest of Canada pull up their pants in a sense.
What would happen with our equalization payments? What would they do to make up for that? You know what I mean? Does he address that?
That's part of Jeffrey Rath's. No, he just says that they'd have to get their act.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like that's
Quebec would drown.
That's one of Jeffrey Rath's points.
Quebec wouldn't be able to survive.
Yeah, 100%. And Jeffrey Rath was saying, again, I'm paraphrasing, so go watch the exact thing. But he was saying that you have people in Laurentian Canada, down in the Great Lakes, that is deciding these payments, and Alberta hasn't. We've done them. We've come to the table on them, but it's not like we're voting on them saying yes, we want to do this. And so it's just a lack of representation. So, anyways, my point in saying that is there's a lot of things at play here. I think it's the longest shots. I think is Alberta and parts of Canada becoming U.S. I think Canada becoming U.S. is a really, really, really long shot. I think the biggest thing is everyone coming to the table for more freedom to pass through people-wise, economically, military sharing of resources for like a North American shield. Kind of what Kevin O'Leary's been talking about. So, anyways.
Crazy. Yeah, that's interesting. So, what's the name of the video again? I want to see
man. It's on the Jason Levine show, Lavigene. He's got a nonstop conversation with different people. It's Jeffrey Rath, Bruce Party.
Wow.
There's a former MLA of the Wild Rose Party, and there's I forget who the other guy was, but it was a good 20-minute clip I watched. Bruce Party put it on his Twitter. You can check it out there.
I just quickly looked up the Alberta equalization
Jeremy,
payments.
Paul, another note, let's try to get Bruce on in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that might
Bruce
be
is
it.
amazing.
It's about 18 minutes
Brilliant.
or 20 minutes.
Okay. Alberta's net contribution to federal finances totaled approximately $244.6 billion, averaging about $16.3 billion per year. So this is over the last 15 years. In 2021 alone, equalization costed Alberta taxpayers nearly $3 billion, equating to an average of $650 per every man, woman, and child in Alberta. Crazy. That's a lot of money.
And if you think also in context of the opportunity cost of that money, right? Like it's helping Canada, but we also are all provinces that choose to be a part of a larger country. And you think of that money invested in Alberta economy over the years, what that could also be producing. It's not just that money. It would be exponentially larger with the growth factor.
Well, and if the provinces got their act together and became financially stable on their own, that money could stay in its own province and then fund its own people. And like $650 for every man, woman, and child, like that's almost $3,000 for my household, or $2,500. Like, and like that's just my household alone. That's a lot of money. And then anyway, that's another show. We should do an equalization show.
Yeah. Hey, and one last thing. Can you hear me okay? I know we're delaying a bit. One last thing just to address as we're wrapping up here is Paul reposted our prediction, right? And I use the term unelected. And I've had some fun lately going back with people and chatting through. And I want to bring clarity because a lot of people are reading a lot into the word unelected. Yeah. Just for the record, I understand our system of governance. I understand its history. I have studied it in university, and I know a lot of this stuff. I'm using the term unelected on purpose in the sense of democracy, rule by the people. I wrote out a couple of my thoughts on this because when you are, and the greater point is that our system of government is showing its weaknesses, and there's other aspects we can do. Danielle Smith got in as Premier of Alberta the same way she was an unelected person that won the leadership race of the UCP in Alberta, and then she assumed the role of Premier. And I think generally, I'm not a fan of that idea that someone as an outsider like Mark Carney literally has less than 0.01% of the population give their vote saying, I want him to run the party, gets to assume the highest office in our country. I am saying that is not democratic. Yeah. It should be gone through. Like, there's a lot of things you can go through. So I just want to bring clarity to that because I know how our system works. I'm using that to kind of spur debate. Yeah, there
should be more provoking, harder thought on this process. If a prime minister or a president of a country resigns, there should be an election called. Like, that's the point I think you're making, being like the people should decide here, not the party, because look at the damage this has caused by letting the party go and elect their person during this time. Like, it seems so silly.
Or similar to the States where you've got two people that run, you have a president and a vice president. So you know who else is on the ticket. But that's not the tradition of the Commonwealth or of our Westminster parliamentary system that goes back way. I understand that, but my point is, I'm asking the question, is our system of government showing cracks? Is it weaknesses being exposed where it's actually ruled by few and the many are controlled by a rule by few? That's what I'm posing as the question here. So anyways, just wanted to bring that up.
Well, from Canada to the United States of America,
it's really annoying not being in the same studio.
The show goes on. No, I know, it's a bit of a delay. But all the way from Canada, the show goes on. Thank you, everybody.
Show goes on.
We'll see you all same time next week.